The sandstorm raged across the alien desert, a swirling wall of ochre dust that stretched beyond the horizon. Commander J. Park stood motionless, her eyes fixed on the holographic display that flickered with incoming data streams. The starship, Thunderbolt, hummed beneath her feet, its advanced systems running at maximum capacity. Outside the ship's reinforced windows, the landscape of Epsilon Eridani's third planetary system looked nothing like Earth. Jagged rock formations jutted from the ground like broken teeth, and the sky burned with an unnatural reddish-orange glow. This was humanity's frontier, the latest battleground in a war that had been raging for almost a decade. Huang Kil, the communications officer, approached with a datapad. His hands were steady, but Jay could see the tension in his shoulders. "Commander," he said, "we've got movement on the long-range scanners." Jay nodded. She had been expecting this. The Krell had been probing their defenses for weeks, looking for any weakness they could exploit. But humanity had learned from its past. Every battle, every conflict had taught them something new. Her mind drifted to the stories her grandfather used to tell. Tales of tank battles in Earth's deserts, where human courage and quick thinking had overcome seemingly impossible odds. The Gulf War had been just a prelude to what humanity would become. The holographic display suddenly lit up with multiple red markers. Krell reconnaissance ships were approaching the sector boundary. Each marker represented a potential threat, a possible point of invasion. "Activate quantum interference generators," Jay commanded. Her voice was calm, almost casual, but there was steel underneath. Huang's fingers danced across the control panel. Across the fleet, hover tanks began to adjust their systems. These were not the heavy metal machines of the past. These were living weapons, adaptive and intelligent, connected directly to their human operators through neural interfaces. Jay remembered her training. They weren't just fighting a battle, they were protecting humanity's future. Each meter of this alien desert represented hope, the hope of a species that refused to be conquered. The first Krell energy weapon discharged in the distance, a massive plasma bolt that would have vaporized entire city blocks back on Earth. But here in this moment it was just another light show. Sergeant Min Park's voice crackled through the communication system. "Adaptive camouflage at 98% efficiency, they won't see us coming." The hover tanks began to move, not in rigid military formations but like liquid metal, flowing and changing, becoming one with the sandstorm. Their quantum adaptive systems made them almost invisible, blending perfectly with the swirling dust and rocky terrain. Jay watched the battle map. The Krell were precise, mathematical in their approach. They believed technology could solve every problem. But they didn't understand humans. Humans were chaos. Humans were unpredictable. A memory flashed in her mind. Her grandfather sitting in their small apartment showing her old military photographs. "War isn't about technology," he'd said. "It's about spirit. It's about refusing to give up." The first wave of Krell ships entered the sector. They moved with mechanical precision, scanning and probing. They expected resistance. What they didn't expect was to find nothing. "All units," Jay spoke into her communication link, "prepare for Sandstorm protocol." The hover tanks continued to move, becoming indistinguishable from the environment. They were ghosts now, waiting, watching, preparing to strike. In this moment, humanity was more than just a species fighting for survival. They were an idea, an unstoppable force that could adapt, transform, and overcome. The battle for 73 Easting was about to begin. The hover tanks of the 3rd Adaptive Warfare Division sat silent in their staging area. Sunlight glinted off their sleek surfaces, making them look more like liquid metal than traditional machines. Each vehicle was a marvel of human engineering, packed with technology that would have seemed like magic just decades earlier. Sergeant Min Park walked between the tanks, his hand running along their smooth exterior. Unlike the clunky machines of previous wars, these were living weapons. Neural interfaces connected directly to the pilot's brains, turning each tank into an extension of human will. Inside the lead tank, Corporal Sung Reese checked her systems. Her fingers moved across holographic displays that flickered and danced with incoming data. The quantum interference generator hummed softly, a low vibration that seemed to pulse with potential energy. "Status check," she called out. One by one, the tank crews responded. Each voice was calm, professional. They knew what was at stake. This wasn't just another battle. This was about proving humanity's place in the universe. The generator that Min was adjusting was their secret weapon. It could bend light, distort sensor readings, and essentially make the tanks invisible to the most advanced alien tracking systems. But it was unstable. One wrong calibration could expose their entire position. "This is why humans are different," Min muttered to himself. The Krell relied on pure mathematical precision. Humans used creativity. They invented solutions on the fly. He remembered the prototype testing. Dozens of failed attempts. Exploded circuits. Fried computer systems. But each failure brought them closer to success. That was the human way. Learning, adapting, pushing forward. The tank's AI system began its pre-battle diagnostic. Complex algorithms ran through millions of potential scenarios in milliseconds. But the final decisions would be made by humans. The AI was a tool, not a replacement. Sung adjusted her neural link. The tank seemed to come alive around her, its systems becoming an extension of her own body and mind. She could feel the heat of the desert, the vibration of the generator, the potential energy waiting to be released. Outside, the sandstorm was building. Perfect timing. The natural interference would help mask their technological adaptations. Nature and technology working together. Another uniquely human approach. "We're ready," Min said, his voice cutting through the tension. The first wave of Krell scouts would be approaching soon. They would expect a traditional battlefield, predictable movements, clear targets. Instead, they would find something entirely different. Each tank's quantum adaptive camouflage began to activate. The metal seemed to shimmer, becoming almost transparent. They would blend perfectly with the swirling sand and rocky terrain. Sung checked her weapon systems. Plasma cannons, quantum disruptors, adaptive ammunition that could change its properties mid-flight, technology that pushed the boundaries of what was possible. "Remember," Min's voice came through the communication system. "We're not just fighting. We're proving something. Humans aren't just survivors. We're innovators." The first distant rumble of Krell engines could be heard. The battle was about to begin. Min took a deep breath. Years of training, months of preparation. This moment would define everything. The quantum generator reached full power. The tanks began to disappear into the landscape, becoming nothing more than a shimmer in the hot desert air. Sung's hands moved instinctively across the controls. Her neural link was fully integrated. She was the tank. The tank was her. Adaptive. "Warfare Division." Min's voice was calm, almost cheerful. "Let's show these aliens what humans can do." The sandstorm grew stronger. The tanks vanished. The technological crucible was ready to be tested. The desert erupted in light and sound. Krell energy weapons sliced through the air. Massive plasma discharges cutting violent lines across the horizon. Each blast could vaporize entire city blocks, a display of technological might meant to intimidate and destroy. But the human tanks were already moving. Corporal Sung Reese watched through her neural interface as the alien weapons missed their marks. Her tank seemed to dance between the plasma bolts, becoming nothing more than a wavering heat shimmer in the intense desert landscape. "Target acquired," she whispered. The first Krell battle platform exploded silently. No dramatic fireball, just a sudden disintegration. One moment it existed, the next, nothing. The quantum disruptor had done its work perfectly. Sergeant Min Park's voice crackled across the communication network. "Maintain adaptive pattern, stay invisible." The Krell commanders couldn't understand what was happening. Their advanced sensor systems showed nothing. Weapons locked onto empty space. Targets that appeared and disappeared like ghosts. Another plasma bolt screamed past Sung's tank. She could feel the heat through her neural link, but the adaptive, Camouflage kept her vehicle untouched. The tank moved like liquid, shifting and changing with the swirling sandstorm. On the command ship, Commander J. Park watched the battle unfold. Her fingers traced holographic battle maps that showed the impossible happening. Human tanks were destroying Krell platforms faster than the aliens could respond. "They're using the environment," one of the Krell commanders would later report. "It's like the desert itself is attacking us." That was exactly the point. Human technology wasn't just about bigger weapons. It was about understanding, adapting, turning limitations into advantages. Sung targeted another Krell platform. Her weapon systems were now fully integrated with the tank's quantum interface. She didn't aim. She became the weapon. Another explosion. Another alien battle platform vanished. The sandstorm grew stronger. Perfect cover, perfect weapon. Min's tank moved alongside Sung's. They were a team, connected, thinking as one. The neural interfaces allowed for instantaneous communication, strategies forming and changing faster than any computer could process. Krell ships began to retreat, but retreat wasn't surrender. "They'll try something desperate," Min warned across the network. He was right. The alien commanders launched their final assault. A concentrated energy weapon that could destroy entire square kilometers. A weapon that had crushed countless civilizations before humanity. But they didn't understand humans. Sung's tank and the others around her didn't dodge. They didn't run. They absorbed the energy. The quantum adaptive systems turned the most powerful weapon in the Krell arsenal into nothing more than a light show. The energy dissipated, spread across the tank's surfaces, rendered harmless. "Counterattack," Min commanded. The human tanks struck simultaneously. No warning, no mercy. Pure calculated destruction. In less than 7 minutes, the Krell assault was over. Commander J. Park allowed herself a small smile. Her grandfather's stories about tank battles in Earth's deserts hadn't been just stories. They were lessons. Strategies passed down through generations. Adaptability, creativity, the refusal to accept defeat. That was humanity's real weapon. As the sandstorm began to settle, the human tanks remained, waiting, watching, proving once again that technology was nothing without the spirit to use it. The battle for 73 Easting was more than a military engagement. It was a statement. Humans had arrived, and they would not be conquered. The battle reached a moment of pure chaos. Krell commanders watched in growing panic as their perfectly calculated strategies collapsed like wet paper. Their holographic displays showed impossible scenarios, human tanks appearing and disappearing, striking with surgical precision, then vanishing before any counterattack could be mounted. Commander J. Park's voice remained calm. "All units execute Sandstorm Protocol, maximum adaptive camouflage." Sergeant Min Park understood what that meant. This was no longer just a military engagement. This was about proving something fundamental about humanity's survival. The quantum adaptive systems pushed beyond their original design. Tanks began to move like living creatures, not machines. They flowed through the desert landscape, becoming indistinguishable from the swirling sand and rock formations. Corporal Sung Reese felt her neural link intensify. The tank was no longer just a weapon. It was an extension of her body, her mind. She could feel the heat of the desert, the vibration of distant explosions, the subtle movements of alien tracking systems trying desperately to lock onto her position. One Krell commander screamed into his communication system. His rigid military protocols were failing. Humans were not following any predictable pattern. They were chaos incarnate. The first wave of Krell support ships arrived, expecting to find a clear battlefield. Instead, they found nothing. Just an endless desert that seemed to be alive, shifting and changing with impossible speed. Min's tank struck first, a quantum disruptor blast that came from nowhere, destroying a massive Krell support vessel before its crew could even understand what was happening. "They're using the environment," one Krell tactical analyst reported, his voice trembling. "The entire landscape is a weapon." That was exactly the point. Sung targeted another group of alien vessels, Her weapon systems had become something beyond traditional technology. Each shot was a calculation, a moment of pure human creativity that no computer could predict. Another explosion. Another alien platform vanished. The Krell began to retreat. But retreat wasn't surrender. It was pure, animal panic. Commander J. Park watched the battle unfold. This was more than a military engagement. This was a demonstration of human potential. Min's voice crackled across the communication network. They're breaking. Push forward. The human tanks moved like a living wave. No traditional military formation, just pure, adaptive movement. Each tank communicating instantaneously through neural links, moving as a single organism. One Krell commander tried to organize a final defensive position. His hands moved across complex control systems, mathematical precision, perfect calculations. But mathematics couldn't account for human creativity. The tanks struck from impossible angles. Weapons that shouldn't have been able to hit their targets found their marks with terrifying accuracy. The desert itself seemed to become a weapon. Sung felt something beyond fear or excitement. This was pure human potential, the ability to adapt. To survive, to overcome. Another Krell ship exploded, then another, and another. The quantum adaptive systems were pushing beyond their original design. The tanks were learning, changing, becoming something more than their creators had imagined. Min watched the battle map. The Krell were no longer a unified force. They were becoming a scattered, panicked group of survivors. Final push, he commanded. The human tanks moved forward. No mercy, no hesitation. This was humanity's moment, a demonstration that technology was nothing without the spirit to use it. That adaptability was the true weapon of any advanced civilization. The breaking point had been reached, and humanity had broken through. The last Krell ships disappeared into the distant horizon, leaving nothing but burning wreckage and scattered debris across the alien desert. Silence fell over the battlefield, a profound quiet that spoke louder than any victory cry. Commander J. Park stood on the bridge of the Thunderbolt, her hands clasped behind her back. She had seen many battles, but this was different. This was more than just a military victory. Sergeant Min Park's voice came through the communication system. Sector 73. Easting is secure, Commander. The hover tanks of the 3rd Adaptive Warfare Division began their final sweep of the battlefield. Each machine moved with a fluid grace that seemed almost impossible. They were no longer just vehicles. They were living weapons that had redefined the very concept of warfare. Corporal Sung Reese ran her final system diagnostics. The quantum adaptive systems had performed beyond all expectations. They had turned a potential defeat into a complete victory. The human casualties were surprisingly low. Just a handful of tanks damaged, no critical losses. Against an enemy that had conquered dozens of advanced civilizations, this was nothing short of a miracle. But it wasn't a miracle. It was human innovation. Back on the command ship, holographic displays showed the complete destruction of the Krell assault force. Mathematical projections had given the human forces less than a 12% chance of victory. Those projections didn't understand one crucial factor: human determination. Min walked between the tanks, checking their systems. Each vehicle bore the marks of battle: scorched exterior, quantum adaptive surfaces still shimmering with residual energy. They looked like survivors of something impossible. A communication came through from Earth. High-ranking military officials wanted a full report. They wanted to understand how a small human force had defeated what was considered an unbeatable enemy. Sung knew the answer. It wasn't about technology. It was about spirit. The tanks began to regroup. Their quantum interfaces hummed with a quiet energy. They had become something more than machines. They were a testament to human potential. Commander Jay remembered her grandfather's stories about tank battles in Earth's deserts. Those old conflicts were just a prelude to this moment. Humanity had always found a way to survive, to adapt. The first memorial would be simple, a marker placed in the alien desert. No grand statues, no elaborate inscriptions, just a simple statement of what happened here. Easting, where humanity redefined warfare. Min looked at the burning wreckage of Krell ships. They had believed their technology made them invincible. They had forgotten the most important lesson of all, that innovation comes from the spirit, not from machines. Sung's tank moved across the battlefield, its quantum adaptive systems still active. She could feel the desert, the heat, the subtle vibrations of a world that had just witnessed something extraordinary. The Krell would remember this battle. They would tell stories. Stories about the humans who turned a battlefield into a living weapon. Stories about an enemy that couldn't be predicted. An enemy that adapted faster than any technology could track. Commander J knew this was more than a single battle. This was a message to the entire universe. Humanity had arrived, and they would not be conquered. The sun began to set over the alien desert. The hover tanks of the 3rd Adaptive Warfare Division stood silent. Survivors. Victors. A testament to human potential. Another chapter in humanity's story had been written. In the language of adaptation. In the spirit of survival.